The ice in my water glass had long since melted, leaving behind a ring of condensation on the linen tablecloth that I'd been tracing with my finger for the past 3 minutes. Stalling. I was stalling, and I knew it, standing just inside the hotel ballroom entrance, like someone who'd forgotten why they came. The bass from whatever overplayed dance track the DJ had chosen thrummed against my ribcage, competing with my heartbeat for dominance. Neither was winning. 15 years. I'd spent 15 years imagining this moment, rehearsing conversations in my head during conference calls and red-eye flights, perfecting my casual indifference in bathroom mirrors from Singapore to Sao Paulo. But I'd never anticipated the smell. That specific combination of industrial carpet cleaner, too many competing perfumes, and something distinctly institutional that reminded me of cafeteria lunches and fluorescent hallways. It made my stomach turn in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. The banner stretched across the far wall like a proclamation. Riverside High Class of 2009 to 15-year reunion. Gold lettering on navy fabric. Predictable. Beneath it, in smaller text that made something tighten in my chest. Sponsored by Kenneth Solutions Group. My company. My name. My checkbook. The door shut behind me with a soft click that somehow cut through the music. 3 people near the coat check turned, and I watched their faces cycle through recognition like a slot machine. Confusion. Calculation. Something that looked almost like panic. Perfect. I took a step forward, my heels clicking against the parquet floor with more confidence than I felt. The lukewarm water in my glass rippled slightly. My hands were steadier than I'd expected. Jane. The voice came from my left, pitched high, with disbelief. Ashley Morrison. Chen, according to the name tag affixed to her sequin dress, like a scarlet letter. Head cheerleader. Prom queen. The architect of 1,000 small cruelties that had carved themselves into my bones like initials on a tree trunk. Her mouth was open, lipstick feathering into the fine lines around her lips. Up close, I could see the calculation in her eyes, the rapid recalibration of social dynamics that had once been her specialty. Ashley. I kept my voice pleasant, boardroom neutral. The tone I used with venture capitalists who thought my age made me inexperienced. You look well. It was a lie. We all looked different. 15 years had softened some angles and sharpened others in ways that expensive skincare could only partially mask. Ashley's blonde hair was cut in that carefully tousled style that cost $300 to look like you'd just woken up. But her eyes were the same. That particular shade of calculating blue that had once looked me up and down in the cafeteria and declared, loud enough for the entire lunch period to hear, that I was the girl who'd never make it. She'd said it while I wore my mother's altered hand-me-downs, carried a lunch packed in reused grocery bags because we couldn't afford the meal plan, clutched library books because purchasing the wrong brand of anything meant standing out even more than poverty already made me. I heard you were doing something with computers? Ashley's voice climbed at the end, making it a question, though we both knew she was fishing for information. Technology consulting. Business optimization systems. We help companies identify operational inefficiencies and implement scalable solutions. I took a sip of the terrible water, letting the pause stretch. Kenneth Solutions Group. We're the primary sponsor tonight, actually. I approved the catering budget myself. The color drained from her face so quickly, I almost felt bad. Her spray tan suddenly looked garish against her pallor. Almost. That's wow. Ashley's smile was struggling, a fish gasping on a dock. That's incredible, Jane. I'm so happy for you. The lie was so transparent, I could have read a newspaper through it. Thank you. And you? What are you doing these days? I already knew, of course. I'd done my research. Social media made stalking remarkably easy, though I preferred to think of it as due diligence. Stay-at-home mom. 3 kids. She touched her necklace, a nervous habit I remembered from chemistry class. My husband David is in pharmaceutical sales, so I get to focus on family. It's very fulfilling. The way she said fulfilling suggested she was still trying to convince herself. I recognized the defensive tilt of her shoulders, the slight elevation of her chin. Years of reading body language in boardrooms had made this easy. That sounds lovely, I said, and meant it more than she'd believe. I had nothing against stay-at-home parents. I had everything against people who'd made my adolescence feel like a prison sentence. Oh my God, is that Jane Kenneth? Melissa Park emerged from the crowd like a life raft, her face genuinely bright. Behind her, I could see the ripple effect of recognition spreading through the ballroom. Heads turning, conversations pausing, someone pointing, not even attempting subtlety. I cannot believe you're here. Melissa's enthusiasm seemed authentic. She'd never been cruel in high school, just invisible. We'd shared a lab table in chemistry and never spoken outside those 45-minute periods. I follow your company on LinkedIn. That hospital network optimization you did last year was brilliant. Thank you. My shoulders relaxed fractionally. I didn't realize you were in healthcare. Hospital administrator at County General. She grinned, the same slightly crooked smile I remembered. Boring compared to your work, but I love it. Come on, let me introduce you around. Half these people won't believe you actually showed up. She wasn't exaggerating. As we moved through the ballroom, I felt the weight of attention like a physical pressure. People who'd never known my name in high school suddenly wanted to shake my hand, to claim they remembered me, to ask about my work with the careful casualness of networking. The DJ lowered the music slightly, and my name passed through the crowd like currency. Jane Kenneth. That's her company on the banner. I heard she's worth 8 figures. She used to eat lunch in the library. That last comment came from somewhere behind me, stage whispered but still audible. I didn't turn. I'd learned that the best revenge wasn't confrontation. It was success so loud it made their whispers irrelevant. Then I saw them. They stood near the bar, forming their own island in the sea of reunion attendees. Brad Morrison, Ashley's twin brother and former quarterback. Jenny Caldwell, who'd accidentally spilled paint thinner on my final art project senior year, destroying 3 months of work. And Marcus Webb, who'd asked me to prom as a joke, then laughed when I'd said yes, telling anyone who'd listen that he'd rather die than be seen with Charity Case Kenneth. They were staring at me now. Brad gripped his beer bottle so tightly I could see his knuckles whitening from across the room. Jenny's expression was unreadable, caught somewhere between shock and something that might have been shame. Marcus looked away first, suddenly fascinated by the floor. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I felt 15 again, small and powerless and so desperately, consumingly angry that my hands started to shake. Jane. Melissa's hand was gentle on my elbow. You okay? Fine. The word came automatically, then I caught myself. Actually, I need a moment. Bathroom, down the hall, second door past the ballroom entrance. I set my water glass on a passing server's tray and headed for the exit, maintaining my composure until the ballroom door closed behind me. The noise became muffled, distant. I could hear my own breathing, quick and shallow in the empty corridor. The bathroom was mercifully vacant. I gripped the cold marble sink and studied my reflection. The woman staring back was a stranger in some ways. Tailored burgundy dress that cost more than my mother's monthly mortgage payment used to be. Hair professionally styled that morning at a salon where they served you espresso in actual china. Makeup applied by someone whose hourly rate made my teenage self want to weep. I looked successful. I looked powerful. I looked like I might vomit. The door opened behind me. I straightened automatically, sliding the professional mask back into place as I turned. Jenny Caldwell stood in the doorway. She'd changed since high school too, though less dramatically than some. Her hair was darker, cut in a practical bob that suggested someone who didn't have time for styling. Simple black dress. Minimal jewelry. She looked exhausted in a way that went deeper than one late night. Hi, Jane. Her voice was quiet, careful. Can we talk? Every instinct screamed at me to say no, to walk past her and back to the ballroom where I could continue my victory lap. But something in her posture, something uncertain and raw, made me pause. What do you want, Jenny? She closed the door, leaning against it like she needed the support. I want to apologize. For everything. For the art project, for all the other times I participated in bullying you or went along with it or just didn't stop it when I could have. I waited. Silence, I'd learned, was often more powerful than any response. I know it doesn't change anything, Jenny continued. Her hands were twisted together, knuckles white. I know sorry doesn't undo the damage. But I've thought about it constantly over the years. About how we treated you. How I treated you. She took a shaky breath. I have a daughter now. She's 12. And the thought of anyone treating her the way we treated you makes me physically sick. So you're apologizing because you have a daughter. I kept my voice flat, neutral. I'm apologizing because it was wrong. Because I was wrong. Because you deserved better, and I knew it even then. And I did it anyway because I was scared and insecure and thought being cruel would somehow make me feel less small. Jenny's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm apologizing because I'm trying to be the person who can look at the worst thing she's done and take responsibility for it. Part of me wanted to tell her it was too late. That apologies 15 years after the fact meant nothing. Part of me wanted to ask if she had any idea what it felt like to be so alone, so convinced of your own worthlessness that you'd seriously considered just disappearing. But another part, buried under ambition and success and expensive clothes, just felt tired. Okay, I said finally. Thank you for saying that. Jenny looked surprised, like she'd expected more resistance. That's it. What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? That everything's fine now? I turned back to the mirror, adjusting an earring that didn't need adjusting. I don't know if I forgive you, Jenny. I don't know if I can. But I appreciate the apology. That's fair. She wiped carefully at her eyes, trying to preserve her mascara. For what it's worth, I think what you've accomplished is incredible. I read that profile in Business Weekly last year. You're kind of a legend. Kind of, I agreed, and was surprised to find myself almost smiling. Jenny left quietly, slipping out the way she'd entered. I stayed in the bathroom another minute, collecting myself, remembering why I'd come. Not for them. For me. To prove something to that scared, lonely teenager who'd counted down the days to graduation like a prisoner marking time until parole. I'd proved it. I'd won. So, why did I still feel empty? When I returned to the ballroom, people were settling into seats at round tables. The formal program was apparently starting. Melissa waved me over to a table near the front, and I recognized a few other faces from high school. People who'd been kind, or at least neutral. Switzerland. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. The speeches were predictable. The principal, now retired, talked about how we'd all grown, all achieved so much, how proud we should be of who we'd become. I half-listened, cataloging who sat where. Brad and Ashley at a table with their old popular crowd, all of them looking worn around the edges like furniture that had been used hard and never maintained. Marcus at a different table, noticeably alone despite being surrounded by people. Then Sarah Chin, the program director whose name tag identified her as class secretary, took the microphone. We're so grateful to our sponsors tonight, especially our platinum sponsor, Kenneth Solutions Group. Jane Kenneth, would you like to say a few words? I hadn't prepared anything. Standing felt surreal, like watching myself from outside my body. The walk to the small stage at the front felt like miles. The microphone was cool and solid in my hand. Thank you for being here tonight, I began. My voice was steady from countless presentations. When I was asked to sponsor this reunion, I'll be honest, I hesitated. High school wasn't an easy time for me. The room went very quiet. I could see Ashley studying her plate like it contained the answers to the universe. Brad stared at his beer. Marcus had his arms crossed defensively. But I realized something. I continued, letting the words breathe. The person I am now, everything I've achieved, it didn't happen in spite of high school. It happened because of it. Every time someone told me I'd never make it, every time I felt invisible or worthless or alone, I made a choice. I chose to prove them wrong. I let the silence stretch, watching the words land like stones in water. So, thank you. Thank you to everyone who doubted me. Thank you to everyone who made me feel like I had something to prove. Because you were right about one thing. I did have something to prove. And I did. The applause started slowly, tentatively, then built. It wasn't universal. Some faces looked uncomfortable, even angry. But I didn't care. I'd said what I came to say. I handed back the microphone and returned to my seat, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my temples. Melissa squeezed my shoulder. That was perfect, she whispered. Dinner passed in a blur of people stopping by the table. Congratulations. Questions about business cards. Requests to pick my brain about opportunities. I smiled and nodded and played the part. By the time dessert arrived, I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. I excused myself, heading for the hotel's outdoor terrace. I needed air. Space. To remember how to breathe without performing. The terrace was empty. The night air was cool against my overheated skin, carrying the sharp chlorine scent from the pool below and something sweet from the landscaping. I could still hear the music from inside, muffled now, almost pleasant. I closed my eyes and just existed for a moment, without an audience, without a role. Jane. I opened my eyes. Brad Morrison stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm interior light. He'd always been handsome in that obvious, conventional way. Blonde hair, strong jaw, the kind of symmetrical features that made life easier. Time had been kind, or maybe he'd just had money for maintenance. Brad. I didn't move from my spot at the railing. He stepped onto the terrace, letting the door close. Up close, I could see lines around his eyes, slight softness under his jaw. Still handsome. Just human now, instead of godlike. That was quite a speech, he said. Thank you. I'm not sure it was a compliment, but his tone wasn't harsh. Just tired. You called us out pretty hard in there. I didn't name names. You didn't have to. He moved to the railing, keeping respectful distance. Everyone knew exactly who you were talking about. Good. We stood in silence. From somewhere below, traffic sounds drifted up, the city continuing on, indifferent to our small drama. I'm sorry, Brad said finally, for how we treated you, for being part of making your life hell. You didn't deserve that. 2 apologies in one night. I wasn't sure what to do with them. Why? I asked. Why were you all so cruel? What did I ever do to you? Brad was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. You were different. You didn't care about the same things we cared about. You didn't try to fit in or play the game. And that scared us, I think. Made us feel like maybe all the stuff we thought mattered didn't actually matter at all. So you made me pay for that? Yeah, we did. He turned to look at me, and genuine regret showed in his eyes. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could go back and be a better person. But I can't. All I can do is tell you I'm sorry and hope that maybe, someday, that means something. I wanted to stay angry. Anger was familiar, comfortable. It had fueled me for 15 years, pushed me to achieve, to succeed, to prove everyone wrong. But standing there, looking at this middle-aged man who'd once seemed so powerful, I felt the anger starting to crack. I don't forgive you, I said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I hear you. He nodded slowly. That's more than I deserve. Brad went back inside, leaving me alone again with the city sounds and cooling air. I stayed on the terrace longer than I should have, thinking about forgiveness, about revenge, about what it actually meant to win when the victory felt this hollow. When I finally returned to the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted. The lights were lower now, music louder, and people had loosened up with alcohol and nostalgia. Couples swayed on the dance floor to some slow song I didn't recognize. I made my way back to my table, ready to collect my clutch and call it a night. I'd won. I'd proved my point. There was nothing left here for me. Melissa was at the table, talking animatedly with someone I didn't recognize. She saw me approach and waved. Jane. Perfect timing. I was just telling Mark about your presentation at the Healthcare Innovation Summit. He's thinking about. But I wasn't listening anymore. Because the door to the ballroom had just opened, and everything else faded into background noise. Time didn't actually stop, of course. The music kept playing, people kept dancing, conversations continued around me like water flowing around a stone. But my vision tunneled, my breath caught, and every nerve in my body went on high alert. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just been shorter then. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples now, cut shorter than he used to wear it. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone in that effortlessly elegant way that suggested either natural style or very careful cultivation. But it was his face that made my heart stop. Not because he was handsome, though he was. Not because I recognized him, though I did, even after all these years. It was because half of his face was covered in burn scars. The right side, from his temple down to his jaw, was a landscape of healed tissue, the skin pulled tight and discolored, beautiful in its own terrible way. His right eye was slightly smaller than his left, the lid reconstructed. His ear on that side was partially missing. And he was scanning the room like he was looking for someone. Then his eyes found mine. Everything I'd carefully built, my composure, my success, my armor of expensive clothes and professional achievements, crumbled in an instant. Because the man standing in the doorway, the man who'd just locked eyes with me across a crowded ballroom full of people from our past, the man whose scarred face was making my heart race and my hands shake and my carefully constructed world tilt on its axis, was the one person I'd never expected to see again. The one person I'd spent 15 years trying to forget. The one person who'd known all my secrets, who'd seen me at my lowest, who'd saved my life one terrible night and then disappeared without a trace. Daniel Price. And from the way he was looking at me now, with recognition and something that looked almost like fear, whatever had brought him here tonight was going to destroy everything I'd built. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. Just him. Just those eyes, one surrounded by unmarred skin, the other framed by tissue that had been rebuilt, reshaped, survived. They were still the same color I remembered, that unusual amber brown that had reminded me of honey held up to sunlight. But everything else about this moment was impossible. Daniel Price was dead. I knew he was dead because I'd looked for him. For years, I'd looked. Every social media platform, every search engine, every alumni database and public record I could access without crossing into illegal territory. Nothing. No trace. No digital footprint. No evidence that Daniel Price had existed beyond our senior year of high school. People didn't just vanish like that unless they were dead or didn't want to be found. And now he was walking toward me. Jane. Melissa's voice sounded distant, concerned. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I had. The crowd seemed to part for him instinctively, though I wasn't sure if that was real or just how it felt in my fracturing perception of reality. He moved with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. Each step was deliberate, measured, like someone who'd had to relearn how to walk and didn't take the ability for granted. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could see the fine details of his scars, the way they caught the light differently than regular skin. Close enough to smell his cologne, something cedar and clean that was nothing like the cheap body spray he'd worn in high school. Close enough that I could hear his breathing, slightly uneven, like he'd just run a marathon. Hi, Jane. His voice was rougher than I remembered, textured with something that might have been smoke damage or screaming or both. It's been a long time. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. 15 years of vocabulary, 3 languages, countless presentations to rooms full of skeptical investors, and I couldn't form a single coherent word. You two know each other? Melissa asked, looking between us with open curiosity. We went to school together, Daniel said, not taking his eyes off me. We were friends. Before. Such a small word to carry so much weight. I finally found my voice, though it didn't sound like mine. I need some air. I turned and walked toward the terrace doors, not caring if it looked like I was running away, because I was. My heels clicked rapidly against the floor, too fast, the sound of retreat. Behind me, I heard Melissa say something, heard Daniel's responding murmur, heard footsteps following. The terrace was no longer empty. A couple was leaning against the far railing, engaged in what appeared to be either a romantic reunion or a dramatic argument. I veered away from them, heading for the darker corner where the light from the ballroom didn't quite reach.
Jane, wait.
Daniel's voice behind me, closer than expected.
Please.
I spun around, and 15 years of unanswered questions came flooding out.
You're dead.
You're supposed to be dead. I looked for you. I looked everywhere for you, and you were just gone, and everyone said your family moved away, but there was nothing, no forwarding address, no social media, nothing, and I thought. I stopped myself before I could say what I'd thought. What I'd convinced myself of during the darkest moments. That he'd killed himself. That he'd finally done what he'd talked about doing that night on the bridge, the night everything changed, the night I talked him down and held his hand and promised him it would get better. The night he'd saved my life by letting me save his. I know, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I wanted to reach out, but I couldn't. It was complicated. Complicated. I laughed, and it came out sharp and bitter. You vanished. You didn't even say goodbye. Do you have any idea what that did to me? You were the only person who... I stopped again, biting back words that felt too raw, too honest. The only person who understood. The only person who'd seen me completely and hadn't looked away. The only person who'd made high school bearable. Daniel moved closer, into the patch of light spilling from the ballroom windows. The scars were more visible now, and I could see they extended down his neck, disappearing under his collar. Whatever had happened to him had been catastrophic. What happened to you? I asked softer now. The scars. The limp. Daniel, what? Housefire. 3 years ago. He said it matter-of-factly, like he'd told this story many times before and had learned to strip the emotion from it. I was living in Portland. Faulty wiring in an old apartment building. I got out.
Barely.
Spent 6 months in the hospital. Another year in physical therapy. I felt my anger deflate, replaced by something worse. Guilt.
Concern.
A grief for pain I hadn't been there to witness. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I couldn't have known, because you disappeared, and I had to disappear. He cut me off gently. After graduation. My family, we had to leave. It wasn't a choice, Jane. And I couldn't contact you, because it wasn't safe. Safe? What does that even mean? I was aware my voice was rising, that the couple at the other end of the terrace was now blatantly watching us, instead of pretending not to. I didn't care. Safe from what? Daniel glanced toward the ballroom, then back at me. His jaw tightened, and I saw him make some internal calculation. Not here. Can we go somewhere private? There's a lot I need to explain, and I don't want an audience. I don't even know if I want to hear it. The words came out automatically, self-protective. You left. You made that choice. Whatever your reasons were, you still left me here alone with all of them, and you never even. I know. His voice cracked slightly. I know, and I'm sorry. I have been sorry every single day for 15 years. But I came here tonight specifically to find you, to finally explain, to try to make you understand.
Please, Jane.
Give me an hour. That's all I'm asking. I looked at him, really looked at him. Try to see past the scars and the expensive suit and the impossible fact of his presence. Tried to find the boy I'd known, the one who'd sat with me on the bleachers during lunch periods we both spent hiding from our respective tormentors, who'd introduced me to obscure indie bands and science fiction novels, who'd understood what it meant to feel invisible in a crowd of people who saw right through you. He was still in there somewhere. I could see it in the way he stood, slightly hunched like he was trying to take up less space. In the nervous gesture of his hand twitching toward his pocket. In the hope and fear warring in his expression. 1 hour, I heard myself say. But not here. I can't be here anymore. Relief flooded his face. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks down. Probably still open. Or we could just walk if you prefer. Walking. I need to move. I went back inside briefly to grab my clutch from the table and make my excuses to Melissa. She gave me a knowing look that I chose to ignore, and I could feel the weight of stares as I left the ballroom with Daniel. Let them talk. They'd been talking about me for 15 years anyway. The night air felt cooler now, Or maybe it was just the adrenaline wearing off. We walked in silence for half a block, the sounds of the hotel fading behind us. Downtown was relatively quiet for a Saturday night, just scattered groups heading to bars and restaurants, the occasional car passing by. "You look good," Daniel said finally. "Different but good. Successful. I read about your company. You've done incredible things." "Don't." I kept my eyes forward. "Don't try to make small talk like we're old acquaintances catching up.
You don't get to do that."
"You're right. I'm sorry." More silence. Then, "I'm not good at this. At any of this. I've played this conversation in my head 1,000 times, and now that it's happening, everything I planned to say sounds wrong." We reached a small park, really just a square of grass with some benches and a sad-looking fountain. It was empty except for a homeless man sleeping on a bench at the far end. I sat down on the nearest bench, and Daniel sat beside me, careful to leave space between us. "Start at the beginning," I said. "Why did you leave?" He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My father was in witness protection. Is in witness protection. The whole family. That's why we disappeared." I turned to stare at him. "Witness protection? Your father worked at a tire factory." That's what he told everyone. What he was supposed to tell everyone. Daniel's hands were clasped between his knees, knuckles white. "His real name isn't Marcus Price. Mine isn't Daniel Price. Everything about our lives here was a cover." "A cover for what?" "He witnessed a murder. Back in Chicago, before I was born. Organized crime. The kind of people who don't forget and don't forgive." He testified, and in exchange, the government gave us new identities and relocated us. Multiple times. Riverside was supposed to be the last stop, the permanent one. We'd been here for 8 years. Long enough that I'd actually started to believe we were safe, that this was real life, and not just another temporary stop. He paused, and I could see him struggling with the memory. Then, about a month before graduation, my father got a call. Someone had found us. We had 72 hours to pack what we could carry and disappear again. New names, new location, new lives. No contact with anyone from our old life. Ever. I tried to process this information, to reconcile it with my memories of his family. His quiet father, who'd come to exactly one school event in 4 years. His mother, who'd always seemed nervous, uncomfortable in crowds. His younger sister, who'd never been allowed to have friends over. "You could have told me," I said. "That night, or any time before you left. You could have at least said goodbye." I couldn't. We were forbidden from telling anyone, and the marshals were watching us constantly that last month. My phone was monitored, my emails were monitored. I couldn't go anywhere alone. And I knew, his voice broke. I knew if I saw you to say goodbye, I wouldn't be able to leave. I would have done something stupid like beg you to come with me, even though that was impossible. So I took the coward's way out. I just left. A memory surfaced. The last week of school. Daniel had been absent for 3 days, and when I'd asked about him, a teacher had said his family had a situation. I'd assumed someone was sick. I'd never imagined this. "You spent 15 years in witness protection," I said slowly, testing the reality of it.
"No."
"I spent 3 years in witness protection." He turned to face me fully. On my 21st birthday, I aged out of the program. Legally, I could make my own choices. So I chose to leave. "You left your family?" I changed my name back. Legally this time. Took my mother's maiden name instead of my father's fake one. Started over as Daniel Price, which technically isn't even who I was born as, but it's who I was when I met you. So it's who I wanted to be. He smiled sadly. "The marshals told me I was being stupid, that I was putting myself at risk. But the people my father testified against, most of them are dead now or in prison. The threat is minimal. And I couldn't keep living as someone I wasn't." "So you've been back for 12 years? Living as yourself? And you never once tried to contact me?" "I tried. God, Jane, I tried so many times." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered. "I found you online about 8 years ago. Read about your company. Saw pictures of you at conferences.
You looked happy.
Successful. Like you'd built this incredible life. And I thought, why do I have to walk back into that and dredge up the past? What could I possibly say that would make any of it okay? You could have said you were alive. You could have said you didn't just abandon me without a word. My throat was tight. Do you know what it did to me, losing you? You were the only good thing about high school. The only person who made me feel like I wasn't completely alone. And then you were just gone, and I spent months thinking it was something I did, something I said, wondering if you were okay, or if you'd... I couldn't finish that sentence. Couldn't say out loud what I'd feared. I'm sorry. Daniel's eyes were bright in the streetlight. I'm so sorry, Jane. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you by staying away. I thought you'd be better off without me. That wasn't your choice to make. I know. You're right. I was a coward. He took a shaky breath. After the fire, when I was in the hospital, I had a lot of time to think about my life. About the choices I'd made, the people I'd pushed away. You were at the top of that list. So when I saw that the reunion was happening, I thought maybe this was my chance. To finally explain.
To apologize.
To try to make things right, even though I know I probably can't. We sat in silence. A car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating us before plunging us back into shadow. The homeless man on the far bench stirred but didn't wake. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing music, the bass thumping faintly through the night air. What do you do now? I asked finally. For work, I mean. I'm a teacher. High school English. In Seattle. A slight smile touched his lips. Ironic, right? I spend my days in the place that was torture for both of us. But I wanted to be the kind of teacher we never had. The one who notices the kids sitting alone at lunch. The ones who are struggling but too proud to ask for help.
Of course he did.
Of course Daniel would take his pain and turn it into something that helped others. That was who he'd always been. Do you like it? I asked. Most days. The kids keep me honest. They can smell bullshit from a mile away, so I have to show up as my authentic self. Scars and all. He gestured to his face. Actually, the scars help. They ask about them, and I tell them the truth, that life can be random and cruel and unfair. But that surviving doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you're still here. That's very Mr. Keating of you. He laughed, and the sound was so familiar it made my chest ache. Dead Poets Society. You remember. You made me watch it 3 times. It's a good movie. It's a sad movie. The best ones usually are. We fell quiet again, but this silence felt different. Less angry. Still painful, but maybe starting to heal at the edges. I saw your speech tonight, Daniel said. Before you saw me. I was standing in the back. What you said about high school making you stronger, about choosing to prove everyone wrong, that was powerful.
You really did it, Jane.
Everything you said you wanted to do, you did it. So did you, I said. You survived. You built a life. That takes strength, too. Sometimes I'm not sure if it was strength or just stubbornness. He looked down at his scarred hands. After the fire, there were days I wasn't sure I wanted to keep going. The pain was significant. And looking like this, I knew life would be different. Harder. People stare. Kids sometimes cry when they see me. Adults try not to look, and somehow that's worse. I'm looking, I said quietly. And I don't see something broken. I see someone who survived something terrible and kept going. That's not weakness, Daniel. He met my eyes, and something passed between us. Recognition, maybe. The same thing that had connected us 15 years ago, when we were both just trying to survive. I missed you, he said. Every single day, I missed you. I missed having someone who understood. Who got what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to feel like you were screaming and nobody could hear you. I missed you too. The admission felt like pulling glass from a wound. I tried to replace you. Made friends in college, built a network, surrounded myself with people. But nobody ever quite understood the way you did. Jane, he stopped, seeming to wrestle with something. There's something else I need to tell you. About why I really came here tonight. Before he could continue, my phone vibrated in my clutch. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. A text from Melissa. Where are you? Brad Morrison is looking for you. Says it's urgent. I showed Daniel the message. I should probably get back. This night is already surreal enough without Brad deciding he needs to find me. Wait. Daniel caught my arm gently as I stood. This is important. The thing I needed to tell you. It's about that night. The bridge. Senior year. I froze.
We had never talked about that night.
Not after it happened, not ever. It existed in my memory like a photograph I'd locked in a drawer. Too painful to look at, too important to throw away. Daniel, I don't think. Please. His hand was still on my arm, light but insistent. I need to say this. I've needed to say it for 15 years. I sat back down slowly. My heart was racing again, but for different reasons now. He stared at the fountain, not looking at me, like the words were easier if he didn't have to see my face. That night, March 14th, I was going to jump. I'd already written the note. I'd already said goodbye to my sister in my head. I was standing on that railing, and I was ready. I know, I whispered. I'd known it then too. Had seen it in his posture, in the way he'd gripped the metal, in the terrible calm of his voice when I'd found him there. But what you don't know is why I was there. Why that night, specifically. He took a shaky breath. The marshals had told us that afternoon that we were moving again. In 2 weeks. New state, new names, new everything. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep being nobody. Keep losing everyone. Keep pretending that this half-life was worth living. My throat was tight. You never told me that part. I couldn't. The marshals, the rules, all of it. But that's why when you showed up, his voice cracked. You asked me what was wrong, and I couldn't tell you the truth, so I told you everything else instead. All the other reasons I wanted to disappear. The bullying, the loneliness, feeling like I'd never matter to anyone. And you talked me down. You sat with me for 3 hours on that freezing bridge and made me promise to keep living. I remembered. My hands had been numb by the end, and I'd missed my curfew for the first time in my life. My mother had grounded me for a week, and I hadn't been able to explain why it had been worth it. You saved my life that night, Daniel continued. But what I never told you was that you also broke my heart. Because I knew I had to leave you, and I knew you'd think I'd lied to you about everything. About wanting to live, about mattering, about all of it. I kept that promise, Jane. I kept living. But every day since, I've carried the guilt of knowing what it must have looked like to you when I disappeared. Tears were running down my face now, hot and fast. I didn't bother wiping them away. I thought I'd failed you, I said. I thought whatever I'd said that night hadn't been enough. That you'd gone somewhere else and finished what you started. I had nightmares for years about finding you too late. God, Jane, no. He turned to me, his own eyes wet.
No.
You didn't fail me.
You saved me.
You're the reason I'm sitting here right now. Even when I wanted to give up, I remembered what you said. That surviving is a choice we make every day. That we matter even when it doesn't feel like it. I said that. I didn't remember. That whole night was a blur of cold and fear and desperate words. You said a lot of things, but that's what stuck. He pulled something from his pocket. A piece of paper, worn and refolded so many times the creases had nearly torn through. I kept this. I wasn't supposed to keep anything from my old life, but I hid it. Took it with me through every move, every identity change. Even through the fire, it was in my wallet, and my wallet was in my pants pocket. It survived. He handed it to me. I unfolded it carefully, recognizing my own handwriting from 15 years ago. Messier than it was now, the letters rounded and young. Dear Daniel, you matter. I know you don't believe it right now, but you do. You matter to me. You matter to your sister. You matter to people you haven't even met yet. Please keep living long enough to find out how much.
Jane.
I'd written it on a piece of notebook paper and given it to him at the end of that night, made him promise to read it whenever things got dark. I'd forgotten about it completely until this moment. You kept this, I said stupidly, unable to process it. It's the only thing I have from before. The only thing that connects me to who I was when I actually felt like myself. He took it back gently, refolding it with practiced care. I read it every year on March 14th, to remind myself why I'm still here. My phone vibrated again. Another text from Melissa. Jane, seriously, you need to come back. Something's happening with Brad. He's asking everyone where you went. I showed it to Daniel reluctantly. I really should go back. But I hesitated. Can we keep talking? After tonight? I need time to process all of this, but I don't want you to disappear again. I'm not going anywhere. He pulled out his own phone. Can I give you my number? My real number this time. No more vanishing acts, I promise. We exchanged information, and I was struck by how surreal it was. Getting Daniel Price's phone number, like we were normal people with a normal history instead of two ghosts trying to haunt each other back to life. I'll text you tomorrow, I said, standing. We have a lot more to talk about. I'd like that. He stood too, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Thank you for listening. For not telling me to go to hell. I would have deserved it. You probably still deserve it, I said, but I was almost smiling. I'm just too tired to be that angry right now. I'll take it. We walked back to the hotel together, not touching but close enough that our shoulders occasionally brushed. The ballroom was more chaotic than when I'd left. A crowd had gathered near the bar, voices raised in what sounded like an argument. Melissa appeared at my elbow immediately. Thank God. Brad's having some kind of meltdown. He's been drinking, and he's telling everyone that he needs to talk to you about something important. Ashley's trying to get him to leave, but he won't go. What does he want with me? I don't know, but he's getting aggressive. Security's about to kick him out. She noticed Daniel for the first time and did a visible double take at his scars, then caught herself. Sorry, I'm Melissa. Are you a friend of Jane's? Daniel Price. And yes, old friend. He glanced at me. Do you want me to stay? In case things get ugly? I can handle Brad Morrison, I said with more confidence than I felt. As if summoned, Brad pushed through the crowd and spotted me. His face was flushed, his tie was loosened, and he was holding what was probably not his first scotch of the night. Jane, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. He stumbled slightly, caught himself. We need to talk.
Right now.
It's important. Brad, you're drunk. Maybe you should call it a night. I kept my voice calm, aware that everyone was watching. I'm not that drunk. I'm just drunk enough to finally say what I should have said 15 years ago. He moved closer, and I could smell the alcohol on his breath. I need to tell you something. About senior year. About why I was so awful to you. Brad. Ashley appeared, grabbing his arm. Stop. You're embarrassing yourself. I don't care. He shook her off. She deserves to know the truth. They all deserve to know the truth. The room had gone quiet now. Even the DJ had turned down the music. Everyone was watching, phones out, recording. Whatever was about to happen would be all over social media within minutes. The truth about what? I asked, though part of me wanted to walk away before he could answer. Brad swayed slightly, then seemed to gather himself. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire ballroom. The truth is I had a crush on you. All through high school, I liked you. You were smart and funny, and you didn't care what anyone thought, and I was terrified of what that meant about me. He laughed bitterly. So, I bullied you instead. Made your life hell to hide how I really felt. And then I convinced everyone else to do the same because if they hated you, I could pretend I did too. The silence that followed was absolute. Ashley's face had gone white. Marcus, standing at the edge of the crowd, looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Jenny was crying quietly. I stared at Brad, trying to process this information, trying to reconcile it with years of cruelty and humiliation. You bullied me because you had a crush on me, I said slowly. That's what you're telling me. That's your explanation. I was a coward. I was scared and stupid, and I hurt you because I didn't know how to deal with my own feelings. He took a step closer. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just telling you the truth.
You deserved better then. You deserve better now.
You deserve to know that none of it was really about you. It was always about me being too weak to be honest. You're right, I said, and my voice came out cold. You were a coward. You made my life a living hell because you couldn't handle your own emotions. Do you have any idea how fucked up that is? Do you have any idea what that did to me? I know. No, you don't know. I was angry now, properly angry. All the rage I'd suppressed throughout the evening finally breaking free. You don't get to confess your feelings 15 years later like it makes any of it okay. You don't get to make your guilt my problem. You terrorized me. You made me hate myself. And now you want what? Absolution? Forgiveness? Understanding? I just wanted you to know. I don't care what you wanted. My voice was rising, and I didn't care who heard. I don't care about your crush or your guilt or your drunken confession. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't undo anything. It just makes it worse, because now I know that all of it, every cruel word, every public humiliation, every day I went home crying, all of it was because you were too much of a coward to say you liked me. Brad's face crumpled. I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry, Jane.
Your sorry means nothing to me. I stepped closer, and he actually flinched. You want to know what would have meant something? Treating me like a human being. Standing up for me instead of tearing me down. Being brave enough to be kind. But you weren't. You chose cruelty. So now you get to live with that.
Not me.
I'm done carrying your guilt. I turned to leave, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Behind me, I could hear Ashley hissing at Brad, could hear someone crying, could hear the whispers starting. I didn't care. I was done with all of them. Daniel was waiting by the door. He didn't say anything, just fell into step beside me as I walked out of the ballroom for the last time. We made it to the lobby before I realized I was shaking. Not from anger anymore. From something else. Release, maybe. Or relief. That was intense, Daniel said quietly. That was necessary. I stopped walking, leaned against a marble column. God, did I just do that? Did I just have a public meltdown at my high school reunion? You set a boundary. You told someone who hurt you exactly how their actions affected you. That's not a meltdown. That's healthy. It's going to be all over social media by morning. Probably. Does that bother you? I thought about it. Thought about my carefully cultivated professional image, about clients who might see the videos, about what my competitors might say. Then I thought about 15-year-old Jane, alone and hurting, and how she would feel knowing that someday she'd be strong enough to speak her truth. No, I said finally. I don't think it does. We walked outside. The night air was cooler now, almost cold. The street was quieter. Most of the Saturday night crowd had settled into wherever they were going to be. Do you want company? Daniel asked. Or would you rather be alone? Company, if you don't mind. I wasn't ready for him to disappear again, even temporarily. There's a diner about 6 blocks from here. Open all night. Makes terrible coffee but amazing pie. Wanna walk? God, yes. We started walking. For a while, neither of us spoke. I was processing too much. Daniel's return, his explanation, Brad's confession, my own outburst. It was all too big to fit inside my head. Can I ask you something? Daniel said finally.
Sure.
When you talked me down that night on the bridge, did you mean it? What you said about Matring? Every word. Even though we barely knew each other? We knew each other enough. I glanced at him. You were the only person who saw me.
Really saw me.
Not what I looked like, or where I sat in the cafeteria, or how much money my family had. You saw me. That was enough. He was quiet for a moment. You saw me too. I want you to know that. In a life where I was nobody, literally, legally nobody, you made me feel like somebody. We reached the diner. It was exactly as advertised. Fluorescent lighting, cracked vinyl booths, a laminated menu that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1987. We slid into a booth by the window, and a tired-looking waitress brought us coffee without asking. Pie, she asked in a voice that suggested she'd asked this question 10,000 times and expected to ask it 10,000 more. What kind do you have? I asked. Apple, cherry, pecan, and chocolate cream. Chocolate cream, Daniel and I said simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. The waitress didn't react, just wrote it down and shuffled away. Still your favorite? Daniel asked. Always. You? Some things don't change. The coffee was indeed terrible. The pie, when it arrived, was transcendent. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, and I marveled at how easy it felt. Like we were picking up a conversation we'd been having for years instead of reconnecting after a decade and a half of silence. What happens now? I asked finally. With us, I mean. Do we just start over? Pretend the last 15 years didn't happen? I don't think we can pretend they didn't happen. They shaped who we are. Daniel traced a pattern in the condensation on his water glass. But maybe we can build something new. Friendship, at least. If you're willing. I think I'd like that. I paused. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more disappearing. If something happens, if things get complicated, if you need space, you tell me. You don't just vanish. Even if it's hard, even if it hurts, you stay and you communicate.
Can you do that?
He met my eyes. I can do that. I promise. Okay then. I held out my hand across the table. Hi, I'm Jane Kenneth. I run a tech consulting firm. I have control issues, and I'm still working through some high school trauma. He smiled and shook my hand. Daniel Price. I teach English, I have survivor's guilt, and I'm also working through some high school trauma. Nice to meet you. We both laughed, and it felt good.
Clean somehow.
My phone buzzed. Multiple notifications. I checked it reluctantly and found texts from Melissa, emails from people I barely remembered, and 3 missed calls from unknown numbers that were probably reporters or gossip bloggers who'd already seen the videos. One text stood out. From Jenny Caldwell. What you said to Brad tonight. Thank you.
Someone needed to say it.
I hope someday you can forgive us, but I understand if you can't. You were braver tonight than any of us ever were. I showed it to Daniel. What do you think? Is forgiveness possible for something like that? I think forgiveness is a process, not a destination. You don't flip a switch and suddenly everything's okay. You work toward it gradually, and some days you make progress, and some days you don't. He refilled his terrible coffee. But I also think you don't owe anyone forgiveness just because they finally feel guilty. That's something you do for yourself. When, and if you're ready. When did you get so wise? Therapy. Lots and lots of therapy. Turns out surviving a house fire gives you plenty to talk about. He said it lightly, but I could see the shadow that crossed his face. Do you want to talk about it? The fire? Not tonight. Tonight's been heavy enough. He smiled. But maybe someday. If we're doing this friendship thing, there's a lot we need to catch up on. 15 years worth. Give or take. We stayed in the diner until after 2 in the morning, talking about everything and nothing. Jobs and cities and the small lives we'd built from the ashes of who we used to be. When the waitress finally kicked us out, we exchanged one more promise to stay in touch, and this time I believed it. Daniel walked me to my hotel, different from the reunion venue, and we said goodbye on the sidewalk like normal people. No drama. No grand gestures. Just 2 old friends promising to text in the morning. I fell asleep still processing everything, my phone full of notifications I'd deal with tomorrow. 3 months later, I sat in a coffee shop in Seattle, watching Daniel grade papers across from me. It had become our Sunday routine. I'd fly up every other weekend, or he'd come down to me. We'd found our rhythm. You're staring, he said without looking up. I'm thinking. Dangerous. But he was smiling. The reunion had become a minor internet sensation for about a week. My confrontation with Brad had been clipped, shared, and analyzed to death. Some people called me inspirational. Others called me harsh. I'd learned to stop reading the comments. Brad had sent one email apologizing again. I deleted it without responding. Ashley had unfriended me on social media, which felt like a gift. Marcus had apparently moved to another state. I didn't care enough to verify. Jenny and I had coffee once. It was awkward but honest. We weren't friends, probably never would be, but we'd made peace. Sometimes that was enough. I got offered a job, I said suddenly. Daniel looked up. Yeah? Where? Seattle. Tech company wants me to consult long-term. Maybe even relocate. I watched his face carefully. I haven't decided yet. What's holding you back? I don't want to make decisions based on other people anymore. I did that too much when I was younger, let other people's opinions shape my choices. I paused. But I also don't want to make decisions that ignore the people who matter to me now. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Jane, I'm not saying I'd move here just for you. I'm saying I'd move here for me, and you being here would make it better. There's a difference. He set down his pen, gave me his full attention. For what it's worth, I think you should do whatever makes you happy. And selfishly, I hope that includes being closer. I like our Sundays. I like them too.
My phone rang.
An unknown number. I almost ignored it, then something made me answer. Jane Kenneth. Yes, this is Riverside High School. I'm the new principal. I know this is unusual, but we're having a career day next month, and several students specifically requested you as a speaker after seeing videos from the reunion. Would you be interested? I looked at Daniel, at his scarred face and kind eyes, at the stack of papers covered in red ink and encouraging comments, at the life he'd built from trauma and survival. Can I bring someone with me? I asked. Another alumnus who's also doing interesting work? Of course. Then yes. I'm interested. After I hung up, Daniel raised an eyebrow. We're going back. We're going back. Together this time. I reached across the table, took his hand. The scars under my fingers were just texture, just proof of survival. Think those kids are ready for a story? I think they need it. The ones sitting alone at lunch, the ones who think they'll never make it, they need to know it gets better. Does it get better? He squeezed my hand gently. Look around. We're here, aren't we? We survived. We built lives. We found each other again. He smiled.
Yeah, Jane.
It gets better. Not perfect. Not easy. But better. Outside the coffee shop window, Seattle rain began to fall. Inside, surrounded by the smell of espresso and the quiet murmur of Sunday conversations, I felt something I hadn't felt in 15 years.
Peace.
The girl who'd never make it had made it after all. And she'd brought her best friend home with her. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. Sometimes it's proving yourself right.